fantasy baseball season. And here's a few hitters I would look to hit on waivers this week. The first guy is Robbie Grossman, the Detroit Tigers. So Grossman, he's come out of nowhere so far this season with the Tigers, and he's the leadoff batter for them. So far in the season, 34 of 136, 4 home runs, 18 RBIs, 7 stolen bases, 18 runs scored, a 250 batting average, and a 385 on base. And Grossman, he's finding ways to get on base for this Tiger team, but he's been on a tear over the last few weeks. So in the last 2 weeks here for Grossman, 16 of 44, 2 home runs, 11 RBIs, 3 stolen bases, a 364 batting average, and a 463 on base percentage. So right now, a lot of fantasy owners, they run out to the wire the last few days and picked him up. His percentage has gone up 10%, is Grossman, but he's still available in 46% of fantasy leagues. And right now, he's finally getting an everyday opportunity after bouncing around in the American League the last few seasons between the Twins and the Oakland Athletics, and now here with the Detroit Tigers. So the last few games here for Grossman: May 13th versus Kansas City, 2 for 4 with an RBI. May 14th versus the Chicago Cubs, 1 for 4 with a homer. May 15th versus the Cubs, 2 for 4 with 2 runs. And yesterday versus the Cubs, 1 for 4. So right now, he's batting first. He's the catalyst here for this Detroit Tiger team. And with the tear he's on, he's definitely worth an ad this week. The second hitter I would look to add this week's Austin Vaughan of the Chicago White Sox. So it's been a rough start for him, is Vaughan, this season. One of the surprising guys to make an MLB roster this season. And so far in the year for Vaughan, 21 of 89, 2 home runs, 9 RBIs, a 236 batting average, and a 340 on base with 15 runs scored. But right now, he's starting to pick things up just a bit here, is Vaughan, over the last couple weeks here for the Chicago White Sox team. The power's starting to show with 2 home runs for him in his last 5 ball games, which is always a good sign here. And this guy, maybe they prematurely called him up, was the White Sox, and him making the roster out of spring training with pretty much no minor league experience here. So the last few games for Vaughan: May 12th versus Minnesota, 1 for 4 with 3 runs scored, a homer and 2 RBIs. May 13th versus Minnesota, 1 for 2 with an RBI. May 14th versus the Royals, 1 for 5 with a homer and 3 RBIs. But the last 2 games have been a struggle. May 15th, 0 for 4 versus Kansas City, and May 16th, 0 for 4 versus Kansas City. So now Vaughan and the White Sox, they travel to Minnesota, which is a pretty decent hitter's ballpark. And we'll see if he could get things going once again here. But if you need some power and a guy who qualifies at first and outfield, I don't think Vaughan's that bad of a pickup this week. And he's available in 63% of fantasy leagues. The next hit is Brandon Crawford of the San Francisco Giants. So this season, it's been a bounce-back season for sure for Crawford. After the last few seasons, he just hasn't done much. And fantasy owners, they've rushed out there to the waiver wire over the last week and added him. He's been added in 11% of fantasy leagues, is Crawford. And so far this season, 26 of 105, 9 home runs, 21 RBIs, 3 stolen bases, a 248 batting average, and a 333 on base percentage. So right now, the main number here for Crawford is the power numbers with 9 home runs. Is a big thing here for a shortstop to have 9 home runs, especially this early in season, and especially for fantasy baseball, where in my opinion there's only a good handful of shortstops left here for fantasy owners. So right now Crawford, he's hitting the baseball well. He's showing power for this San Francisco Giant team, and he's a guy that definitely should be added in the last few games here for Crawford. May 11th versus Texas, 1 for 4 with a run scored. May 14th at the Pirates, 1 for 4 with a homer and 2 runs scored. May 15th at Pittsburgh, 2 for 4 with a homer and 2 RBIs. And then yesterday, 1 for 3 in that one. So now Crawford and the Giants, they go to Cincinnati in a bandbox over there where Crawford, he can really hit some home runs in that small ballpark for a 4-game set. And he's available right now in 64% of fantasy leagues. And if you definitely need some shortstop help or even a utility hitter, Brandon Crawford's definitely a guy to go out there and add this week. The next play is Adam Frazier of the Pittsburgh Pirates. So we've seen flashes from Frazier over the last few seasons where he's one of the best pure hitters in all of baseball at times. And right now, Frazier, he's on one of those tears once again over the last couple weeks. On the season, 51 of 158, 1 home run, 13 RBIs, 3 stolen bases, 20 runs scored, a 323 batting average, and a 390 on base. But over the last couple weeks, he's 20 of 52, 1 home run, 3 RBIs, a 385 batting average, and a 448 on base percentage with 6 runs scored. So right now, Frazier, he's just a man possessed hitting the baseball here for this Pirate team. And he's also a catalyst at the top of the lineup to get things going batting first. So the last few games here for Frazier: May 13th versus San Francisco, 0 for 4. May 14th versus San Francisco, 4 for 5 with 2 runs scored and an RBI. May 15th, 2 for 5. And then yesterday, May 16th, 2 for 4. So right here in his last 3 ball games here for Adam Frazier, he has 8 hits, which is very impressive. And it looks like he's not going to calm down anytime soon. And the Pirates, they're off today. And then they got a matchup at St. Louis for 2 games. And then they go to Atlanta. So we'll see if Frazier could keep this great tear up. And he's available in 52% of fantasy leagues. The next hitter I would look to add is Niko Goodrum of the Detroit Tigers. So Goodrum, he's an ultimate utility guy here for this Tiger team and fantasy owners, qualifying at first, second, short, and outfield. And that's very hard to find nowadays, especially in fantasy baseball. On the season, 26 of 113, 4 home runs, 10 RBIs, 6 stolen bases, 18 runs scored. The only thing, 51 strikeouts in 113 at-bats, which isn't great at all, with 230 batting average and a 315 on base. But over the last couple weeks, that batting average is bumped up to 282 in the time with a 391 on base percentage. So Goodrum, he's playing every day right now for this Tiger team, and he has a lot of value in my opinion because he could play all these different positions. And I know the strikeout rate's high and the 230 batting average ain't great for the season, but right now he's a guy producing for Detroit, and he's going to get every opportunity to play every day. So the last few games here for Goodrum: May 13th versus Kansas City, 2 for 4. May 14th versus the Cubs, 0 for 3. May 15th, 0 for 2 with a run versus the Cubs. And then yesterday versus Chicago, 0 for 4. So he's in a little bit of a slump as Goodrum, but he's going to get a chance. And with his versatility, like I mentioned, he's a player definitely worth an add in more deeper leagues, though. And he's available in 60% of fantasy leagues. The next hit is Yan Gomes of the Washington Nationals. So Yan Gomes, we've seen flashes of him throughout his career, being a pretty decent hitter for fantasy owners and teams. But his best seasons obviously were with the Cleveland Indians years ago as Gomes. But Gomes, he showed some flashes of late here for this national team. And fantasy owners, they've gone out there and added him in 5% of fantasy leagues. And right now, catch is a very weak position in fantasy baseball, where I've mentioned in other videos, a lot of teams, they're going to go through a lot of catches before they find a good one this season, or just keep streaming guys each and every week. So far on the season, 24 of 84, 4 home runs, 13 RBIs, 11 runs scored, 286 batting average, and a 318 on base percentage here for Gomes. But in the last week, he's 6 of 16 with a 375 batting average and a 412 on base. So right now, Yan Gomes, he's hitting the baseball well. He's showing some power, and he's getting the job done for this Washington team. And obviously, he's playing every day. So the last couple games for Gomes: May 11th versus Philly, 0 for 4. May 13th, 0 for 2 versus Philly. May 14th at Arizona, he broke out with a huge ball game, 5 for 6, 4 runs scored and 2 RBIs. And May 15th at Arizona, 1 for 4, and he had the day off yesterday. Now Gomes and this Washington National team, they open up a 4-game set at the Chicago Cubs. And right now, he's still available in 72% of fantasy leagues. And I think he's worth an add. Like I mentioned, catch is a weak position. And Gomes right now, he's on a hot streak. And if you could pick him up and he could ride this streak out a few weeks and then go back into a slump, why not? So he's worth an add. The next hitter is Mike Zunino of the Tampa Bay Rays. So another catcher in the mix here this week on the waiver wire. And so far this season, Zunino, he showed power once again. He's 17 of 82, 8 home runs, 16 RBIs, a 207 batting average, and a 286 on base with 16 runs scored. So Zunino, we know throughout his career with Seattle and Tampa, he's not going to have a high batting average, but he's a guy that's had 30 home runs in a season. And so far this season, 8 home runs for Zunino. Very impressive. in my opinion, and he plays in a pretty small ballpark in Tampa Bay, where that ball, you definitely can hit it over the fence, especially down the lines where it's small. So Zunino, he's available right now in 83% of fantasy leagues in the last few ball games for him. May 11th versus the Yankees, 1 for 3 with a home run. May 12th versus the Yankees, 0 for 3. May 14th versus the Mets, 1 for 2 with a homer. And May 15th versus the Mets, 0 for 4. So now Zunino and the Rays, they go to Baltimore. Another good hitter's ballpark in Camden Yards. And this guy, if you pick him up and just need some power at the catching position, why not? Not many guys are hitting the baseball well at catcher. So if he could bat 210, 220 and show major pop, I think he's worth an ad this week is Zunino. The next hit is Kyle Schwarber of the Washington Nationals. So Kyle Schwarber not getting much respect this season. Even going into fantasy drafts, he went undrafted in a lot of leagues. And right now, fantasy owners, they really haven't paid much attention to Schwarber. He's still out there in 57% of fantasy leagues. And so far this season for Schwarber, 25 of 112, 5 home runs, 15 RBIs, 223 batting average, a 310 on base, and 13 runs scored. And that's what you're going to get with Schwarber. Good power numbers, but a low batting average as well. Last season, he hit 11 home runs in the 2-month season, but he did bat 188. But I think 230, 240 is more of the mark for him, where he'll hit 25 to 30 home runs. And he's starting to heat up with the home run ball. Over the last couple weeks here is Schwarber with 3 home runs, 10 RBIs, and 6 runs scored with a 255 batting average and a 364 on base in the last few weeks here. So Schwarber now in the NL East after the Cubs let him go in the offseason after he was there for 7 seasons. So the last few games for Schwarber, May 13th versus Philly, 2 for 4 with a homer and 2 RBIs. May 14th at Arizona, 3 for 4 with a homer, 2 RBIs, and 2 runs scored. May 15th at Arizona, 0 for 5. And then yesterday at Arizona, 2 for 4 with an RBI and a stolen base. So the Nationals open up now a 4-game set at the Chicago Cubs versus Schwarber's former team. And hey, you know he's going to have incentive and motive to go out there and crush the baseball. And I think this is going to be a big week for Schwarber. So right now, if he's out there on your waiver wire, he's been producing. He's been hitting the ball well. And now with the Cubs coming up, he's a guy you should go out there before he really gets things going and add to your roster. The next hitter is William Contreras of the Atlanta Braves. So Contreras, he's the main man behind the plate now for this Brave team. With the injury to Travis d'Arnaud, that's going to cost him 2 months of the season. And Contreras, I mentioned him as an ad a few weeks ago here. And so far in the early going for him, 10 of 38, 3 home runs, 9 RBIs, 8 runs scored, a 263 batting average, and a 364 on base. So William Contreras, we know he's one of the top prospects in that Brave system. And they've called him up now, and he's got the keys to the catching position. And the last couple weeks here, he's been batting a little better as Contreras on the week. 5 for 16, 2 home runs, 3 RBIs, 5 runs scored, a 313 batting average, and a 450 on base. So right now, he's available in 85% of fantasy leagues. And like I mentioned, catcher's a weak position. And this week, a few catchers have shown up on the waiver wire that you should get. I mentioned Yan Gomes earlier. I mentioned Mike Zunino. Now I'm mentioning Contreras here, who's playing for this Brave team, and he's a young catcher that's going to play 5 or 6 games a week easily. So May 12th versus Toronto, 1 for 4 with a homer. May 14th at Milwaukee, 1 for 2 with a run. May 15th at Milwaukee, 2 for 3 with a homer. And May 16th at Milwaukee, 1 for 4 with an RBI. So Contreras, he's contributing. He's hitting the baseball, and he's showing those power numbers. And if he's a guy that can play a full season, I think he's a catcher that can hit 20 to 25 home runs in a season. So right now, with him available in a whopping 85% of fantasy leagues, he's definitely worth an ad this week. The next hitter is Ryan Dahlback of the Boston Red Sox. So Dahlback, he's been an interesting player so far this season. And right here, he's a player that should be added in more fantasy leagues, in my opinion, and he's producing right now. Season, I know the numbers aren't great. 24 of 114, 4 home runs, 17 RBIs, a 211 batting average, and a 262 on base percentage with 9 runs scored. But over the last week here, He's 5 of 16, 2 home runs, 6 RBIs, a 313 batting average, and a 353 on base. A throwback. He's getting an everyday opportunity here for this Red Sox team, and he's a player that definitely could get things going. And coming into the season, a lot of people had him in a sleeper for fantasy baseball. In the last few games, he's starting to produce. May 13th versus Oakland, 2 for 4 with a homer and 2 RBIs. May 14th versus the Angels, 1 for 2 with a homer. May 15th versus the Angels, 2 for 4 with 2 runs and 2 RBIs. And then yesterday versus LA, 0 for 3. So in the last 4 games here, he has 6 RBIs as throwback. So he's producing. He's starting to find the holes here, hitting the baseball. And he's maybe a guy that just needed some time. And right now, there's not much pressure on him. Batting anywhere from 6th to 9th in this Red Sox lineup. And if you need some first base help or you're in a deeper league, he's definitely worth an ad in 80% of fantasy leagues. And the final hitter I would look to add on waivers this week's Miguel Rojas of the Miami Marlins. So Rojas, he's been a good hitter the last couple seasons for Miami with a good batting average, driving runs in, and scoring runs. And so far this season, it's been pretty decent for him as well. 38 of 137, 2 home runs, 14 RBIs, 27 runs scored, 284 batting average, and a 360 on base percentage. And over the last couple weeks, he's 17 of 46, 2 home runs, 7 RBIs, 14 runs scored, a 370 batting average, and a whopping 408 on base percentage. So Rojas, he's the catalyst as well for this Miami Marlin team, and he's still available in 51% of fantasy leagues, and he bats first for this team. So the last few games here for Rojas: May 12th at Arizona, 1 for 5 with a run. May 13th at Arizona, 2 for 5 with an RBI and a run. May 14th at the Dodgers, 2 for 3 with 2 runs. May 15th at the Dodgers, 0 for 4. And now we had the day off, so this Miami team, they open a series up at Philly for 3. And then the New York Mets come into town. So Rojas, he's obviously familiar with these National League East teams. And this is where he produces the best, usually, especially versus the Mets, where I could expect Rojas to have multiple hit games this weekend coming up versus the Mets. So he's a player available in 51% of fantasy leagues. And a shortstop position that's very weak. I think Rojas is worth the ad, so that's a few hitters I would look to add on the waiver wire here in Week 7 of the fantasy baseball season.